Shema Yisrael, Hear, O Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, the ever-present one is our God, Adonai Echad. The ever-present one is one. Those are words of our Torah reading, and in its original context, they are words of Moshe, Moses, our teacher. Before Moses are the Israelites, about to move forward, and he to die on the other side of the Jordan. Shema Yisrael, listen Israel. The first and only verb in those 6 words is the word to listen. In its original context, it's listen up, pay attention. We all know how that is when you're starting a conversation. Listen up, Yisrael, as he's addressing the people of Israel. Adonai Eloheinu, the God who has been our deliverer from Egypt, Yud-He Vav-He, that is also Eloheinu, our Creator, Elohim. Adonai Echad, the God that we experienced in coming out of Egypt, that God, Echad, is only one. These are the 6 words that we have been taught to recite on our bed at night. Psychologists use this term, a transition object, that a child to fall asleep at night needs to feel safe, and therefore may have a blankie or may have a teddy to hold on to. My teacher, Professor Neil Gilman, referred to many moments of religion and religious sayings as transition objects. And clearly that is a level that is true. In saying familiar words at night on our bed, we feel safe. They are familiar. They resonate with perhaps the presence of our parents who said those words with us. That is an element of religion, to be in many ways a transition object, that which is there to appeal to the child within us. That's not a negative. All of us have a child within us. All of us embrace our own vulnerabilities, our own insecurities, our own wonder of the unknown. For to be alive is to know that life is dangerous. And all of us find strength in the voice of a loved one. All of us find strength in familiar words. And so, for religion to be a source of comfort of the child within us is not to say that religion is childish. It's to say that each of us can gain nurturance from religion. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad are words identified with the pivotal moments of our lives. They are traditionally the last words that one says while alive. In the Vidui, the confessional prayer that I've had the privilege and responsibility to recite with people in their last moments of life, the formulaic words of our tradition finish with the Shema, those 6 words. They're linked to that story we often recount at Yom Kippur of Rabbi Akiva, the great teacher of Israel in the 1st and 2nd centuries, as he is being taken out to be murdered by torture. And it's the early morning and the sun is rising, and he begins to recite the Shema. And his students say, even now, how can you go so far to be reciting the Shema? And he says, all my life I have wanted the opportunity to indeed fulfill the words that follow. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. And he said, now it's morning. The rabbis will point out that it was the required time of reciting the Shema. One is required to say it with the rising of the sun and the going to sleep at night. And so he said to his students, I have a duty to say words of Shema. And to be able to recite these words now to overcome the moment of what others might do to me is truly to love God. And so it became our people's custom that as our last words of affirmation, we say the Shema like Rabbi Akiva. And on the page of the Torah, the ayin of Shema, the last word, is enlarged, and the daled, the last letter of the last word, and those two letters, ayin and daled, are aid, witness. That when we recite those 6 words, we are bearing witness, testimony to a faith in one God, a radical statement. A radical statement to acknowledge that there is a oneness to the whole of creation, that everything on some deeper level is united and whole because there is only one creator. But it is a creator who is not distant. It's not the prime mover. It's a God who is Yud-He Vav-He, the ever-present one, who is the God of Chesed ve'emet, of kindness and truth, who is close to us, and who calls for love. It's pretty remarkable. It's a command. You shall love the Lord your God, as if that is God's need. And indeed, Maimonides, the great teacher of Jewish law, who will be the first in his book, Sefer HaMitzvot, the first volume of the 14-volume Jewish legal encyclopedia, the Mishnah Torah, will list loving the Lord your God as a command. In the Bible, God has a personality. For the mystics, God creates to express love. Chesed needs to be expressed, kindness. And so here, remarkably, is this quality, even of vulnerability, because God is, they say that God created us in God's image and we return the favor. Which is to say, in terms of how we read Bible and how the Bible is presented, God is vulnerable, God gets angry, and God needs to feel praised and loved. And so a command, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and all your might. But to Maimonides said, how do we achieve love of God? By being a scientist. For when we look at God's handiwork, Maimonides taught, and see the order of the cosmos, when we see the magnificence of the body, and he was a physician, then we fall in love with the source of creation. It was controversial that Maimonides emphasized the importance of the study of science and math to love God, because only in seeing and knowing and appreciating the wonder of the world he wrote do we fall more and more deeply in love with its source. Though Maimonides would also emphasize that how we express love, as the paragraph continues, is by how we act out our own love on behalf of God, and how we educate our children, and how we are present for others. And so on this Shabbat, we have these remarkable moments of Torah, of Moses, 120 years old. These are his last words, not just this week, but in these weeks to come, in which these are the children of those who were the slaves. These are those who will enter with responsibility into the promised land. And this is the only place in the Torah that we have the Shema, the words that will become our touchstone of what it means to be a religious people, a people who knows how to listen. That's the only verb. And when we listen, we hear a chain of transmission. When we listen, we see ourselves as Yisrael, part of a collective, whether born or chosen. We are part of an extended family with a history, who in that listening knows that it is listening that equals relationship. In Masechet Avodah Zarah 54a, there's the following question. If God is involved in reward and punishment, then why is it that if a thief steals a seed and plants it, why does it grow? Why wouldn't God, if God indeed is actively manipulating reward and punishment, why should God allow the thief to benefit from his wrongdoing, her wrongdoing? And then they add a little bit and they say, if a woman is raped, why should she get pregnant? You would think that God would protect her. She's innocent. Because the rabbis were grounded in realities of knowing that bad things happen to good people and that thieves prosper. And so they answer in the Torah, in the Talmud, Olam kamin hago noheg. The world operates according to its order, which is to say, God doesn't actively manipulate. The world is a world that God created that is good, that has rules. The sun rises in the morning and goes down in the evening. That when we're sick, usually, our bodies have the mechanism to allow us to heal. Though I will add that's not the only perspective in the Talmud. For the Talmud also acknowledges mystery. I once asked my teacher, Reb Zalman Schachter Shalomi, how does he understand and how does he comfort somebody in the face of tragedy, which might also be true for how one celebrates with somebody in the face of what has no explanation. He said, the first thing I do when I encounter a situation is I approach it on the 4 levels of Jewish mysticism. Asiyah, Yetzirah, Bri'ah, and Atzilut. The 4 levels of creation, the physical, the emotional, the intellectual, and the spiritual. He says, on the physical level, I just want to know what happened. Tell me what happened. Give me the details. On the emotional level, and again, the context they asked him this question was in the context of tragedy. He says, I just try to be present and hold the people. And intellectually, I can only go as far as Harold Kushner, who chose to entitle his book not why, but when bad things happen to good people. Because he says, Harold Kushner said, one can't explain the why. All one can do is be able to respond in the when, with affirming life and believing in a God who cares. And yet, Reb Zalman said, there is also mystery. The level of Atzilut is the level of getting glimpses of an unknown and saying, I can't explain why, and yet I accept on some level a larger reality to life that is in the realm of the divine. And that too can provide comfort. And that too has to be dealt with very carefully. It teeters on blasphemy. For those who would explain the Holocaust, Elie Wiesel would say, as a punishment, because of the natural need to explain why, that's blasphemy. Because God's knowledge is not our knowledge. How dare you explain the why? And yet, There is mystery. So Maimonides, who was a great rationalist, he was a scientist, he was a doctor, he acknowledged that there are elements of creation that are singularity. That's a miracle. Singularity is a word of physics. That somehow the Big Bang exploded as a unique moment. The idea that it's a unique moment is to say there can be unique moments. There can be things that are out of the norm, that cannot be explained. You cannot explain, even if you believe in the Big Bang as how the world began, what was before the singularity and how it came about. And so Maimonides, he acknowledged that creation itself is a statement of faith. Because he knew Aristotle's teaching. He was a master student, Maimonides, of Greek philosophy, that the world was infinite in its origins. But Maimonides said, I choose to believe in a moment of creation by God because you can't disprove it. And to believe it is to believe in a quality of purpose, that the world has unfolded by a creator's intentionality. And so we make choices of acknowledging that there is mystery, of unknowns. And that's not to say there may not yet be explanations for things we don't know now, but it's to say that the greatest mystery is this moment. The greatest miracle is my ability to speak. That's a miracle in itself. And for each of us to be able to speak and to somebody to hear and listen. Consciousness is a mystery. How we hear and communicate, connect, and if we are indeed fully present in this I-thou of no agenda in hearing and listening, that Martin Buber taught is the mystery of mysteries, the presence of the divine. In speaking with Shelley about this mystery of how the tumor disappeared that the doctors still don't quite explain or understand, there may be a physical explanation yet to uncover. Or not. There are mysteries. But what she shared with me, and that I hold close to my heart, is how the world looks so much more precious. How seeing her daughters and her husband and her parents and her brother and her mother-in-law, who are all with her today, feels like a gift. That is the gift of coming so close to the edge and being pulled back. That is a miracle. To know that each breath we take is a gift. To know that our ability to be aware of life as gift is to celebrate life with open eyes. That is a ness. That is a banner. That is a challenge. For most of us, and naturally, I was once in a hospital and there was a child in the intensive care unit, and the mother said to me, if my child recovers, who had an aneurysm, a brain bleed that had been relieved, she said, if my child recovers, I'll never lose my temper again at my child. And I said to her, I hope you lose your temper sooner than later. For to live life in reality is to be involved with back and forths and challenges and to-do lists and to feel like you're never getting it all done. And yet, the opportunity of Shabbat and the gift of Shabbat is to have a day in which we separate ourselves from the to-do list, from our phones beckoning us with the latest ping. To have Shabbat, as my teacher, Rabbi Bill Burke said, is to learn that one day a week we are called to fall in love with the world again. Ribono Shalom, Master of the universe. V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, and you shall love the Lord your God, b'chol levavcha, with all your heart, V'chol nafshecha, with all your life, uv'chol mildecha, with all your physical being. May we fall in love with life. Amen.